I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh, and joining us from Madrid is Democracy Now! Correspondent, independent journalist Maria Carrion, who has been at the protests all day yesterday. Maria, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy.
Tell us what's happening.
Well, as your viewers and listeners have been able to see, that it's a very serious situation here in Spain. This is just the latest of many, many protests that we have been having here in Spain in the last year especially, and there will be many more coming. People have lost faith in government. People have lost faith in the main institutions. And we are facing 27 billion euros in social spending cuts. Every week, the government unveils a series of new measures that affect primarily education and health and salaries and the welfare of Spanish people. And as we saw at the top of the hour, Greece is really an example of what's coming our way, and that's why I think people are so enraged and so worried, because they see that none of the measures imposed on Greece or in Portugal or in Ireland are having any sort of effect on the economy, on people's welfare, on employment. And so I think people are saying we do not want to head in that same direction.
Maria Carrion, you've spoken also about some of the effects on people already with the austerity measures in place, quite apart from what might happen tomorrow. Can you talk in particular about housing and food?
Housing is a big issue because a lot of Spaniards ended up buying houses or homes back during the main housing boom. What has happened since then is that, first of all, they bought these houses at very inflated prices, as happened in many other places. But here we have over 25% of unemployment. So as people began to lose their jobs, and as housing payments went up, the mortgages went up, more and more people lost their homes. There's been a repossession of many homes, and in Spain there's something very unique to our system, which is that even once the bank repossesses your home, and even when you're evicted from your home and you lose your home, you still are liable for the entire debt, which means that not only are people on the streets or having to find alternative housing and pay for it, but they also owe hundreds of thousands to the banks. This is aggravated also by the fact that most of these banks are being bailed out right now to the tune of 100 million euros, which is about 130 billion euros, which is $130 billion, because of their irresponsible lending practices. So on the one hand, you have all these repossessions and a social movement born out of this that is trying to stop these evictions and these repossessions and negotiate debt with the banks in the name of the families. And on the other hand, you also have a tremendous amount of poverty and hunger. Now we have 22% of Spanish households live in poverty, but about 11.5 million people are at risk of poverty. This means that a lot of people are having to go to food banks where they never had to go for help. A lot of these people are very embarrassed, and in fact, food banks have had to change the way they look so that people are not seen to be going in and out by their neighbors. They've removed a lot of the signs saying food bank, people know where they are, but they look more like supermarkets to sort of normalize the situation. So there's a lot of hunger now as well, and a lot of people at risk for homelessness. And then you have, education that's gone up, and you have the undocumented immigrants who no longer have any rights to health care. So you have just a situation of poverty, increased poverty in Spain, increasing poverty. You're seeing that that's the way that Portugal and Greece have gone as well. And then on the other hand, you have the loss in faith of faith in the institutions. Our finance minister, Luis de Guindos, is the former head of Lehman Brothers in Spain, and he was the head when Lehman Brothers collapsed. The former head of the IMF, Rodrigo Rato, who also was finance minister under the PP, headed Bankia, this banking giant that is now being bailed out to the tune of 23 billion euros. That's basically almost how much the total of the spending cuts for this year. That is.
And can you say something, Maria? Can you say something, Maria, about Rodrigo Rato's role in the housing crisis in particular?
Rodrigo Rato came a little bit late into Bankia's problems, but basically he was asked to handle this banking giant. It was basically several banks rolled into one that became this banking giant called Bankia, and he was asked to manage it. And what happened was that this banking giant basically had lent a lot of money to building companies that could not pay back the loans. It also was lending a lot of money to people who were mortgaging houses who then could not return the money. So basically what happened is that Bankia dug itself into a huge financial hole, while at the same time not informing the government, not informing the Bank of Spain, not informing the right institutions. And by the time that Rato quit, Bankia was asking for this huge public bailout. So he is now being investigated and by the Spanish National Court for mismanaging this bank.
Maria Carrion, we were in Spain just after the announcement came down, right at the time that the announcement came down that Rato would be investigated. And we were interviewing some of the organizers of the M15 movement, what some call the indignados, the angry ones. Can you talk about how that movement, similar to the Occupy movement in the United States, is related to the current protests, is it?
Well, it's at the heart of these protests, really. In Spain, we've always had very organized unions, and we've always had social movements. But basically, you had protests on issue-based protests that would bring in hundreds or maybe occasionally thousands of people to the streets. With the 15N movement, what that has done is that it has brought everybody together. It also has mobilizing strategies that other organizations like the unions did not have, or instruments, and so they're able to organize a protest almost overnight. They also have very creative strategies for protesting. So 15M is key to this. I think that the identification of financial institutions and their very close relationship with politicians is also key. The fact that not only are we having protests at the parliament, but we're also having protests in front of banks, or even occupation of bank branches. You see them spontaneously. You even have flamenco groups going into a banking branch to protest, home repossessions, singing songs and flamenco songs about, the bank's role in the crisis. So I think the 15M movement has really brought it together. There's definitely a before and an after.
Maria Carrion, before we conclude, I wanted to ask you, the protesters who were arrested yesterday are apparently going to be charged with crimes against the state. Can you explain what the implications of that are?
Well, the PP, the Conservative government in power, even before the protests took place, they were already equating them to the 1981 coup d'etat here, the military coup d'etat that tried to return Spain to a dictatorship. And they, posted 1,400 police in riot gear and even sharpshooters around Congress. So this position was already there to criminalize protesters. And now what has happened is that those who've been arrested are being charged with crimes against the nation for trying to, what they say, occupy Parliament while in session, which is a crime. Protesters always said, we're not occupying, we're just surrounding Parliament. But in any case, they are being charged with crimes against the nation, and they will go before a justice at Spain's National Court, which is the court that's reserved for trying high crimes such as terrorism.
Maria Carrion, we want to thank you for being with us, independent journalist, Democracy Now! Correspondent based in Madrid, Spain. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.